this Shabbat, we would typically take out 2 Sifrei Torah, 2 Torah scrolls. For it's one of these special Shabbatot leading up to Passover, Shabbat HaChodesh, the Shabbat of the new month. As this Shabbat, we also announce the coming of the new Hebrew month, the month of Nisan, which begins in the week to come. And that Hebrew month signals for us the beginning of Passover. I know that's the last thing on any of our minds right now. But this Shabbat is supposed to signal the coming of Nisan, which the Torah calls the first month of the year, even though we acknowledge Rosh Hashanah with Tishrei in the fall. The Torah says that Nisan is the beginning of the year because the sun comes up and the air gets warmer, and it's the beginning of the new season. We see leaves and buds and flowers and fruit growing on trees. And so we have a special Maftir reading. Well, our Torah reading, Vayakhel Pekudei, talks about, as we said, the completion of the tabernacle, and thus concludes the book of Exodus, doing so, as Rabbi Martyr taught us in her Kabbalah Shabbat live stream last night, with the words Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek, that together with strength we will be strengthened. Our special Torah reading for the Maftir for Shabbat HaChodesh turns back to chapter 12 in the book of Exodus, and you can follow along if you like. We provided the link to Sefaria.org, which allows you to access the entire Tanakh in Hebrew and in English. And we're on chapter 12 of the book of Exodus, where the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of the months. It shall be the first of the months of the year for you. Speak to the whole community of Israel and say that on the 10th of this month, each of them shall take a lamb to a family, a lamb to a household. But if the household is too small for a lamb, let them share one with a neighbor who dwells nearby. In proportion to the number of persons, you shall contribute for the lamb according to what each household will eat. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a yearling male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep watch over it until the 14th day of this month, and all the assembled congregation of the Israelites shall slaughter it at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses in which they are to eat. They shall eat the flesh that same night. They shall eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or cooked in any way with water, but roasted, head, legs, and entrails over the fire. You shall not leave any of it over until morning. If any of it is left until morning, you shall burn it. This is how you shall eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You shall eat it hurriedly. It is a Passover offering to the Lord. For that night I will go through the land of Egypt and strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and I will mete out punishments to all the gods of Egypt, for I am Adonai. And the blood on the houses where you are staying shall be a sign for you. When I see that blood, I will pass over you, so that no plague will destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be to you one of remembrance. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord throughout the ages. You shall celebrate it as an institution for all time. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the very first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whomever eats leavened bread from the first day to the 7th day, that person cut off from Israel. You shall celebrate a sacred occasion on the first day and a sacred occasion on the 7th day. No work at all shall be done on them. Only what every person is to eat, that alone may be prepared for you. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. For on this day I brought your ranks out of the land of Egypt. You shall observe this day throughout the ages as an institution for all time. In the first month, from the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. No leaven shall be found in your houses for 7 days. For For whoever eats what is leavened, that person shall be cut off from the community of Israel, whether they are a stranger or a citizen of the country. You shall eat nothing leavened. In all your settlements you shall eat unleavened bread. And that is a very long maftir reading. Not only is it a reminder of the instructions to make the paschal sacrifice and to put the blood on our doorposts, on our lintels, so that when the mashchitz, this destroyer, this angel of death, would pass through Egypt, God would prevent any harm from coming our way. But it's also a reminder that we should repeat this ritual each and every year. Remember, because we are taken out of Egypt with a strong hand and outstretched arm, that we should celebrate each and every year on that same occasion, thankful for our freedom. We're taught, "Behold, dor v'dor chayav adam nerot et atzmo ki ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim." And we see this in our Haggadot, in our Passover Seders, that in every generation we should see ourselves as if we have left Egypt. In every generation, we should experience what it was like for the Israelites as they left. There were 9 first plagues, right? We know these. And they didn't affect the Israelites at all. The Torah even stipulates that even the very 9th plague, Hoshech, it was complete darkness. It was pitch black outside. The Egyptians couldn't see inches in front of them, but there was lights for the Israelites. These 9 first plagues didn't impact the Israelites at all. Only the Egyptians, the Israelites seemed safe. Bnei Israel could go about their business, but the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, they're told to put the blood of the paschal sacrifice on their doorposts in order to keep themselves safe. At this moment, God is telling them that they need to act to protect their own well-being. That they need to do something so that the plague doesn't spread to them. About 2 weeks ago, which was the last time we gathered here for Shabbat services in this sanctuary, physically, I spoke about what it means to create sacred community in the face of a pandemic. And I talked about how some things have changed, but we've committed to still building community, and we are, even if that community is virtually. But I can't help but think how much has changed in such a short period of time. This is rapidly evolving. How much has changed in our own states, in New York City, in the state of California, which has an entire shelter in place in the entire country. And all of these attempts by different governors, based on guidelines from the CDC, are attempts to stop the spread of this coronavirus. To do our parts, to stay at home, to flatten the curve, so that we do not overwhelm our healthcare system and our healthcare professionals. That if we don't flatten the curve, our hospitals, our doctors, our nurses will be well over capacity and will be unable to care for those who need it most. Not to mention those who need hospitals for other reasons unrelated to being tested positive for COVID-19. If we don't do our part, then we can't flatten the curve. So, schools have closed across the state. We're asked that non-essential individuals stay off the roads after 8 p.m. All restaurants are takeout only. avoiding any large gathering. The CDC actually says to avoid gatherings of 50 people or more for many weeks. But this only works if we do our part. This only works if we all treat this seriously. I fear what happens if some of us treat it seriously, but others don't. You see what's going on in Florida, where the beaches are open and there's spring break and people are gathering. And so if we're doing our part, but they're not doing their part, does this virus not affect us in the state, but affects them? But as viruses spread, eventually it would come back to us. We all have to do our part. We all have to put the blood on our doorposts. What is it about this 10th plague that only at this moment God requires the Israelites to act? What is it at this moment, as the Israelites are preparing, as God is preparing to take the Israelites out of Egypt, preparing to take them out of slavery, that it's at this moment that God requires the Israelites to act, that they can no longer be passive, they must be active in their freedom, in their well-being. Up until this point, they took so much for granted. Up until this point, they went about life on a day-to-day basis, accepting that this is what life is, accepting that this is their reality. And they didn't know what to do when life threw them a curveball, when all of a sudden there was a chance for change. What's thrown so many of us off over these past several days is how quickly our reality has changed. And it may continue to change. And there's still a lot more unknowns. But I truly believe, and I hope and pray, that if we metaphorically put that blood on our doorposts, if we do our parts, if we stay home, then really stay home. Not working from home, but gathering in large spaces. Not being home from school and doing remote learning, but having massive play dates of large groups of kids. If we really stick to social distancing, then we make sure that that mashchitz, that angel of death passes over us. But we can only do that if we do our part. The Israelites were only spared if they did their part. We cannot be passive during this pandemic. We cannot let this play out. Being a sacred community means that we put each other's health, safety, lives first. Judaism teaches that pikuach nefesh, saving a life, supersedes every other mitzvah, every other obligation in the Torah. And so, we made the difficult decision based on recommendations from the state and the county and the village and the health departments and the CDC to close our building temporarily. Because our health comes first. There's nothing more sacred, nothing more holy than protecting ourselves and protecting each other. There's nothing more holy than saving a life. Mishnah teaches that if we save a life, we have saved the entire world. When Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York State was asked about the disruption to essentially shutting down the entire state of New York, he said, we'll get through it, we'll recover. But if it saves a single life, then it's worth it. If we've saved a life, then we have saved the world. chance that this will get worse before it gets better. But it can only get better if we do our parts. It can only get better if we take that active role, metaphorically put the blood on our doorposts, stay home, to social distance, to wash our hands, to avoid large gatherings. That's the only way that we make sure that this plague, this pandemic, this coronavirus will eventually pass over all of us, and that we'll get through this together. May it be so. May it happen very soon.